Hi boys, this is a crack fest. What is up guys, welcome back to the channel, welcome to another video here and welcome to yet again another Gran Fondo report. This time we're going to go back a few months to late May of 2024 and we're going to cover how I got on at the Galibier Challenge 2024. The clues in the name, fondo in the French Alps with a mountaintop finish on top of the legendary Col du Galibier. Only this time the finish wasn't entirely on the top of the Galibier because the weather conditions in the month of May were a bit iffy in that there was more snow than they typically see, which meant that the mountain pass wasn't actually open until a day or two before the event. It also meant that the finish of the race was a kilometer down from the actual summit. The finish was at the tunnel of the Galibier. Those of you who've climbed the mountain will know where that is. So a bit of a bummer, but still a hefty fondo altogether. 3,350 meters of climbing packed into 110 kilometers. Out of which only 78 or so are timed. The return from the top of the Galibier back down to Saint-Michel-de-Maurienne was not timed. So we are looking at a lot of climbing condensed in a short space of time. So this event has two options: the Medio Fondo, which is essentially straight up from Saint-Michel-de-Maurienne all the way to the top of the Galibier, 35 kilometers or so, and that is the, I guess, most famous side, the one that takes on the Col du Télégraphe first, descends into Valoir, and then climbs to the Galibier. I did the Gran Fondo one, which is that 110 kilometer version, and that took on a little climb up to the village of Orelle, and then also took on the Col du Beau, which is also, give or take, I think it's 10 kilometers with an average of 8%. So a little bit of additional climbing added on to the race before we tackled the ascent of the Galibier, because why not? We're in the Alps after all. So now before we dive into the race footage, you might have seen a video on the channel where I covered how I got on at the Maurienne gravel experience. That was actually the day before this fondo. I'll link the video up above. I do recommend you watch it because you will see that didn't go as great as I would have wanted it to go. So that kind of meant that my confidence took a bit of a knock, and the pacing plan that I had kind of set out to try and hold as I was preparing for this event in the weeks prior kind of went out the window a little bit because it seemed a little bit unrealistic. Now, some of the people on the channel commented on that previous video that I did not take into account the altitude, and that is absolutely true. I was, for some weird reason, completely oblivious to the fact that my performance would take a hit at anything above, let's say, 1,500 meters of altitude. Given that the Galibier goes up to 2,600, it is a good thing that I did adapt my pacing plan, and you will see in the footage as to why that exactly is. Alrighty, so as I am fixing my band-aid here and getting ready for the start, band-aid was because I picked up a serious blister the day before during the gravel race. All the bouncing around on my handlebars kind of took part of my skin away. And as we kind of get ready here for the start, the neutral rollout through the town center of Saint-Michel-de-Maurienne, let's talk a little bit about what my original pacing plan had been as I was preparing for the race. I had originally set out to kind of really stick to race mode for the first part of this fondo, and then the idea was to kind of take on the ascent of the Télégraphe and the Galibier at my own rhythm and kind of go out of race mode a little bit. So that would have meant that the first parts, including the little climb to the town of Orelle, would have been full gas, full throttle. I had wanted to, in my mind, building up to this, I was thinking, well, you know, I could probably try and hold 300 watts for what is probably going to be about a 5-6 minute effort here, and then, you know, take on the descent, make sure I stick with the front group, and then really tackle that Col du Beau at a serious pace, try and ride it kind of sweet spot, and see where that takes me. Now, because of that, you know, the previous day gravel race, I abandoned that, and what I'd set to do is let me see how far I can get all the way to the top of the climb to Orelle, which is that first little climb, see what the situation is like there, and then assess and make a decision on the fly. All right, so after we make our way out of the town center of Saint-Michel-de-Maurienne, the flag drops and we are in race mode, and we're on this false flat section towards this Montée d'Orelle, the little climb towards the village of Orelle. And it is race mode full on, but I'm able to stick to the front group. I'm looking at my watts and I am, at times in sweet spot. I'm assessing my feeling and it is better than the day before. So I'm quite happy with that, but it's still not something that's alluding to a very good day. So I'm kind of at that moment in time deciding, okay, well, I'm definitely sticking to my pacing plan. But at the same time, also, a little bit happy and satisfied that I am able to stick to the group. And in this section, in this false flat section, there's this little kicker that ramps up just a little bit before we dive down to the base of the little climb to Orelle. And at that moment in time, you can already see parts of this front group kind of starting to go into struggle mode a little bit. So I'm trying to move up because I do want to kind of stick with them. And then as we dive down, you can see that it gets very strung out. I don't know whether I'm at the real back of the front group, given the fact that some people were dropping off. It's possible. I was able to snatch onto the last wheel and then kind of just, use the draft on that, descent, flying down to the base of Orelle, where then here you can see everything kind of, bunching back up together as we're about to really start doing some proper first climbing. And as we hit the base of the climb to the town of Orelle, which is a 2.84 kilometer climb at a very respectable average gradient of 5.8 to 6%, the field absolutely blows to pieces straight away, as you might expect. I'm locking in at my FTP, which at that moment in time was 260 watts, and that is where I decide to keep it. And that's kind of a mid-race decision, because I had still been toying with the idea leading on to, or coming on to the base of the climb. Maybe I'm going to go into, the VO2 zone, the red zone, and see how I feel. But straight away, as I was kind of pressing on to that kind of higher echelon of my power zone, I felt that FTP was going to be more than enough. And this is going to be part of two kind of executive decisions that are going to pan out in my favor later on in the race. My thinking at that moment in time was, if I go into the red zone now and I push myself too far and then I don't recuperate, then I have a very long ride ahead of me with essentially still 3 alpine calls remaining. So I lock into kind of 250, 260 watts. And because the field is still pretty, dense, there's always somebody riding around. So there's always a wheel that we can kind of jump to. And it looked at this moment in time like a very kind of similar ability type of riding, in that there wasn't really anybody flying past, nor were there people kind of dramatically dropping off as well. It was kind of a very similar type of pace all the way to the top. So I was able to kind of, get into the zone, stick to that 250, 260, felt okay, not great, not bad, so very much in line with the first couple of kilometers. What was very nice was that our Airbnb was actually here on this climb, and so Hannah and Lily were standing on the side of the road, and that was just amazing to see the little one running out. I was able to just kind of go for a quick high five, or low five in this case. And that's just super motivating. Of course, it was only the beginning of the race, but having your family there for me just makes these experiences just even better and even more worthwhile putting into the memory bank. So the rest of the climb, like I said, just keeps on being locked into that zone, and then we hit the top here. We hit the top of the climb as we go through the little village of Orelle. We hit the descent. The organization had told us that there were some loose gravel patches, that there was essentially danger in the descent. So I didn't go too crazy here. I saw some people flying past, but I didn't fancy jeopardizing my race at that moment in time. So I just kind of kept it relatively easy. to get down in one piece. And then as soon as that little descent is complete, we're back on that main road, and now what was a false flat going up is a false flat going down. We're in kind of a little group. A group is forming as we absolutely bomb it down back to the base of the Col du Galibier. Looking back at that first little climb, that ended up being an effort of 9 to 10 minutes. At 248 watts average, which is pretty much what I had set out to do. Maybe a little bit lower, maybe I could have pressed on a little bit more to be closer to 260, but all in all, again, as we will see later, it would have been more than enough. And then here we go, the foot of the Col du Galibier, the first proper climb of the day, and this is where executive decision number 2 comes into play. The start of the climb, I commence with the group that was formed on that false flat section back down to the town of Saint-Michel-de-Maurienne. And I'm looking at my watts here, and as I am settling into the climb, I'm realizing that if I'm going to want to stick to this group, at least early on, at least in the beginning, I'm going to have to be holding around 230 watts, which is kind of the higher ends of zone 3 for me, sweet spot. At this moment in time, that feels okay, doable, but again, I know that the Col du Télégraphe and the Col du Galibier are still following, so I make another executive decision at this moment in time to let the group go. Let my power number drop to 200 watts, and that is where I would ideally like to keep it for the remainder of the race. I essentially go completely out of race mode at this moment in time, say goodbye to the group, and just go into my own proper pacing plan with the aim of just trying to take it home best way I can all the way to the top. It's one of these things where in Gran Fondo events, you have to keep the bigger picture in mind. Could I have stuck with this 230 watt effort for, 20, 25, 30 minutes and stuck to the group? Maybe. Would there have been drafting? Probably minimal at these speeds going uphill. So all in all those elements together, I just kind of said, right, I'm just going to push my ego to the side and focus on the bigger picture. So after having climbed the 10.6 kilometers in about 46 minutes with an average watts of 209 and having been passed by a good number of riders in the process, it is time for me to start making my way back down yet again to the town center of Saint-Michel-de-Maurienne to then attack the plat principal, the main dish of the day, the combo Col du Télégraphe and Col du Galibier. To the Col du Télégraphe, we go 11 kilometers at 7%, pretty steady, not the most exhilarating of climbs because the views are, well, pretty much non-existent because you're kind of in the forest all the time, but yeah, it all adds up together with the Col du Galibier. Performance-wise here, pretty much down to a T. 208 watts average for the entire Col du Télégraphe, so just a watt below what I had done on the Col du Galibier. So can't really fault the performance up until that moment in time, given the fact that we are gradually edging past the 1,500 meters of elevation at that moment in time. So that is going to start taking its toll a little bit, together with the accumulated fatigue. So very happy about that. I crest the top, having seen very few other riders, so it's safe to say the field is getting very scattered, but that is obviously to be expected in these events. I crest the top, a very quick pit stop, grab a quick bite to eat, and then I make my way down to the center of Valoir, which is where we will then commence the final attack, the final ascent of the day, the legendary Col du Galibier. And then the minute I hit the town of Valoir, a different race begins, and I become somewhat of a different rider as well. When you hit the town of Valoir, then there's a little kicker of about 2 kilometers at about 6.9%. It greets you immediately as you finish the descent, and from that moment on I felt the legs were less jolly than they had been up until that moment in time. I was hanging on to 200 watts, but it started feeling a whole lot less comfortable than it had been doing up until now. After that kind of little kicker, there's a flattish section, relatively flattish section to carry you out of Valoir, and also there, as I was trying to keep the pace up, holding that 200, I knew that it wasn't going to come back, the good feeling. It was downhill from here. And then the knowledge that there was a 12.2 kilometer climb to the top of the Galibier, which was going to see me cover 900 meters in elevation, with the last 5 kilometers being, well, a bit of hell, because that's where the steepest ramps were going to be. I knew that I was in for a rough end to this ride, because I knew that the legs weren't going to come back. It was going to be downhill from there. And at that moment in time, the only thing I was thinking of was just make it to the damn top. Boy, oh boy, was I happy to see that red arc. The last 5 kilometers did indeed end up being quite brutal, and as much a mental fight as a physical one, probably more a mental fight than a physical one. And I'm going to guess that, you know, some of you watching that have done these fondos, that have tried conquering serious alpine calls, when you're kind of in the thick of it, deep in the hurt locker, it's it's quite the journey. And it definitely was for me. Like, I don't know what it was. Like, if I'm looking at the numbers in total, the whole kind of race up until the top, so 4 hours in total, I ended up doing 191 or 192 watts average. So that's not awful, you know, given where I was at the peak of the previous season, which would have been a 4-hour race around 200 watts, different circumstances, kind of more punchy, but still, it wasn't awful. And I also didn't entirely crack on the final ascent. I was able to still kind of put the numbers down to some extent. I obviously faded because of the altitude and what have you. But the entire climb of the Télégraphe and the Galibier would have been, again, 191 watts average. So it's not awful, yet the feeling was was awful at times. And I don't know, I guess I somehow went into that race and kind of thought that I wanted to, yeah, I don't know, arrive or cross the finish line with a bit more kind of, you know, or less depletion, if you'd like, because it really took me everything that I had to really get there. And in the last 5 kilometers, I was teetering on the edge of just kind of saying, I'm going to have to get off the bike. I'm going to have to get off the bike because I cannot keep pushing on to the top. And it was just mentally, you know, just not letting go. So all in all, I am going to say a fantastic experience, a very well organized fondo as well. So if you are kind of, you know, preparing for the 2025 season or whatever season, whenever you're watching this video, consider this one. It's a hell of a climb, but very well organized. It's well marshaled as well, so I really can't fault it. The only issue can be that with the weather, I know with the 2023 version, they had to kind of stop some of the last riders. They couldn't actually go all the way to the top because of the weather conditions. So because it is held late May or beginning of June, in the Alps, in the high mountains, it can be a little bit iffy. But other than that, fantastic event. So for what it is worth, I ended up being 112th out of 577 starters. Mid-pack jack, run of the mill, as you are very accustomed to by now on this channel. So that doesn't really say an awful lot. And with that, I am going to conclude this video. I'm going to thank you very much for watching. If you've watched it all the way through, well done. Thank you very much. If you did, then consider liking the video. It would be very much appreciated. And if you want to stay updated with some of the future videos, then consider becoming a follower and subscribe to the channel. So for now, I'm going to leave you to it. Thank you very much. Again, stay safe, stay healthy, enjoy what you are doing, and I will see you in one of the next videos. Bye-bye.